Hey guys, this is Travis and Kyle with KAD Stories. Today we are with a special guest and very fortunate to meet Jayme Hansen. He's actually very well known in the KAD community and he was actually part of 325 Camera, and we're just really excited to meet him today. So why don't we just get ahead and get to it, Kyle? Why don't you start us off?
Yeah, so I guess I kind of wanted to put this in two parts. I'm not familiar with his backstory, but I know he's been involved in a lot of Korean adoptee, I guess you can call it political stuff and organizations. So I kind of wanted to talk about that. But first off, I kind of wanted to ask him and describe a little bit about his childhood. Apparently, it was not a terribly good adoption story, and I was just wondering if you could kick us off from there, if you could describe it.
Sure. So I grew up in a very tiny farming community in north central Minnesota, a little town called Battle Lake.
Okay.
And, when you're in that very small community, number one, you become an outsider immediately. You don't look the same. I mean, you get the looks when you walk into a restaurant because you look different. Yeah, it was tough growing up within that small farming community. The kids, they bullied me all the time. The classical stories that you hear about bullying where the kid gets shoved in the locker. Nobody called me by my name. I mean, I was basically everybody called me Rice Bowl. That was my name, I guess, going through the public school system. And it was extremely tough. And then it was even worse going back home because my parents, I don't really like to give them that title because they're not deserving of that, were very neglectful and also abusive. So they did stuff like, for instance, like sick the dog on me, and they would just laugh when the dog would attack me. They thought that was quite funny.
That's horrible. What kind of parents are these? How were they able to adopt you? Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so they couldn't have kids of their own. My adopted mother had multiple miscarriages, and so her grandparents paid for the adoption and said, hey, here's another route, go ahead and take these kids. So I don't know if it was forced on them or whatever, but they were probably two couples that should have never had children, period.
About your family structure, were you the only kid?
No, I was adopted with my biological sister.
Oh, wow. How was that relationship then? Has that been helpful for you? Or?
No, because the problem is that our parents would pit us against each other constantly, and I would say the best way of explaining growing up was like being in during the times when the Nazis were around. What I mean by that was they were kind of like the SS. They would put booby traps around the house to make sure that we weren't watching TV, or like if I asked for a snack, I would be actually punished for that because they're like, well, we don't feed you. That was their initial response. And then so if you were hungry, maybe we get some ice cream or something to eat, right? Well, they would always, like, for instance, position like the ice cream box a certain way so that they know that it was moved or things like that.
So it's kind of ironic. I don't know if you know much about Jayme Hansen. I know that he's been in the military, but it's kind of like you kind of grew up kind of in that kind of environment that's really strict, and it's kind of interesting that you chose that route. And
yeah, so the main reason why I chose the military was, I wanted to go to college, but again, my high school counselor was just a total jerk. He's like, look, you're not deserving to go to college. You're really dumb. You should take a technical skill and things like that.
Did you have a disability growing up, or
no
how
disability?
Were your grades then?
Yeah, horrible. So
really?
If I didn't get an A in
you seem smart to me.
Yeah, so if I didn't get an A in shop, I would have had to take my senior year all over again. I had a 2.1 GPA growing up, so I was basically just passed from one grade to the next.
Is the reason why you didn't want to study hard? It's probably the craziness at home. Is that probably why?
It wasn't that I didn't want to study. The problem was, A, I got no help at home. B, I was extremely tired because I had to work on the farm. So I got up at 4:30 in the morning, milked the cows, fed the cows, all that stuff, and then just scarf down my food, jump on the school bus, and get to school. And then
Is there a reason why your dad couldn't do that, or why he make you do it?
So all of us had to pitch in and work. I mean, a farm operation typically involves everybody pitching in.
Okay.
But
Did you hate it growing up? Doing
Oh
it?
yeah,
You
it
did?
was. I mean, you're filthy all the time, so you went to school smelling like cow manure, and
So you're one of 2 kids adopted, correct?
that's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was your sister kind of treated in the same way when she was younger, or you don't know, or based on her
So
experience may be different?
she did, but everybody takes adversity and things a little bit differently. So she had a much harder time coping, even though I felt she had a little bit easier, because her main job was doing house chores, cooking, cleaning, that kind of stuff. And where mine was much more, hard labor, lifting hay bales. You're lifting like 12,000 hay bales in a single day during hay season. Or you might be going out there and putting fence in or painting the barn or whatever it may be doing. So it was a lot more manual labor for me. But, she took the stress and all those issues and kind of internalized it much more than I did.
So there's a lot of kids that I know, unfortunately. You seem to actually were able to come out the other end stronger, but there's a lot of kids that kind of are stuck in that kind of negative mentality, and they end up
blame everything,
and they end up
past
going
and
into
can't
the
move
the self-destructive road. Is that what your sister did, like drugs, alcohol, and
Yeah,
crime?
it wasn't
or?
drugs and alcohol. What hers was in failed relationships. So she was like married like 4 times.
Wouldn't you agree that adoptions is also part of that too? Being adopted can initiate some problems with relationships due
It
to
can.
abandonment.
So it goes back to just like any other type of hardships out there. So like soldiers, a lot of them will go to battle, and some of them will have PTSD. We realize that some of that deals with resilience and how you internalize and how you respond to some of those issues and problems.
So what is your take on it? Like, why do you think you adapted so much better than people that really struggle? What is the
You're
secret? Is there
strong,
something
or
that-
had no
No.
mental health issues, or
No, I've been thinking about that for a long time, and I attribute it to 3 areas. One was because I was working outside, I was playing around with the kittens,
okay.
and I had a pet cat. Well, if you think about a pet, and most people who have pets, I mean, that's really a form of bonding and love and caring, right? And so I had this pet cat that I raised from a kitten, and every day when I'm doing my chores, it would crawl up my leg and sit on the shoulder, and it would sit on my shoulder while I was doing the work. And so that's bonding that I had that my sister never had because of the type of work that I did. The second thing that I attribute it to is ability to go to the library. But I always grabbed as many books as I could. Literally, there were times where I had 30 books in
This
my
is when you were a
arms.
kid, correct?
Yeah, so that was
okay.
one of the luxuries that I was afforded because my mother liked to read. And so we would go to the library only once a month. But every time that we went, I would grab as many books that I could, and on my spare time, I did a lot of reading. So I read, and I realized that there was another world out there for me that I could experience once I left that hellhole. So that was the second attribute that helped me kind of go over that hump. And then the third thing was actually my grandmother.
She was a positive influence.
She
on
was a
yourself,
positive
like-
influence. She, like, for instance, like during my birthday one year, she bought me a little motorcycle, and I rode that up and down, and that just allowed me to just forget about the world for a moment in time and just ride as fast as I could on that motorbike and go up and down that dirt road. I realized that my grandmother sacrificed a lot to get me that little motorbike, even though it wasn't very expensive. But I realized at that moment that it's not about the color of the skin. It's about love, right? And it goes back to what you internalize, what you understand. And I realized at that moment that it didn't matter that my parents were white. That wasn't why they were hateful and neglectful and mean people. That's just who they were as people. And that's why I realized it didn't matter about the skin color of people.
You didn't think because you weren't their blood that
They just
might
didn't
be
care
the
about
reason
you
why
as
they didn't
much
give you
and-
the love that you probably deserved, or you don't think that's part of it?
Several things. Just,
Were they coming from abusive families as
no,
well?
they didn't come from
Wow.
abusive families at all.
Because
So
the grandma seems pretty nice. That's crazy.
yeah. So my grandmother was a wonderful human being, and I kept in touch with her, all her life. She passed away, unfortunately, in 2014. But yeah, she was just a remarkable woman that was just full of love for me. I realized that, like I said, I realized the sacrifices that she made, and that even though there was externally, like I said, the kids that abused me in school were white, the teachers that were, and the counselor that was mean was white, my parents were white. I realized at that point it's an individual thing that you can make that determination if you're going to be a good person and treat people, equally and fairly, regardless of the color of their skin, right? So I learned that from an early age from my grandmother, and I attribute it to her. So, yeah.
So did you lose your way like after 18? Did you say immediately I'm going to go to the military? Is that what you're in your thought process, or did you?
So it goes back to that school counselor. He said, "Hey, look, you're not that bright. You need to do something else." But I wanted to go to college because reading all these different books and stuff like that, I was very intrigued about these things that I learned about, right? And I was told by my parents, there's no way that we're going to help you go to college. We have no money. You're not going to get anything from us. So I had to find my own way. And so at age 17, I joined the Army Reserve. I went to basic training between my junior and senior year. And then on my senior year, once I graduated, I went to AIT. And then I started my journey in the Army, right? My unit got activated, and I was immediately sent to Desert Storm when I was 18 years old. So, and then I came back from Desert Storm, and I worked towards my multiple degrees. So I went back, and I was initially a cook for the Army. They sent me to the wrong school. I was supposed to be an engineer. And
that's a big mistake.
Yeah,
man.
It's a huge mistake by the Army. Yeah.
You couldn't get out of that, or the heck?
Well, the thing is, I'm very low ranking. I don't have a lot of say in the matter, and all the document that they had said that I was going to be a cook. So I went and did the best that I could. Okay. I actually graduated top of my class. I went to learn how to work with a master chef for an additional 10 weeks. Oh, wow. And then I came back and cooked with my reserve unit. But
what made you want to adapt to that lifestyle, like, even though it wasn't your first thing to do, cooking?
You seem like a person that's like.
What made you want to excel at that, even though it wasn't your first choice?
So, you know what? Sometimes you have to do things that you dislike, and just because you dislike it doesn't mean you can't do a good job. So, growing up on a farm, having to work, getting up at 4:30 in the morning, I had a really good work ethic already. And so I just went the best that I can. And I was able to later on, when I went to the IG, they did allow me to switch my MOS. And then I did work for a while working in administration. Okay. And then I moved over and became a combat medic. And then they sent me to school to be a nurse. I was an LPN for some time.
Oh, wow.
And then later on, I did get picked up for Green to Gold, and I became an officer. So I switched over, and now I work as a CFO, or Chief Financial Officer, and I manage hospitals and their finances. So I manage their personnel, HR department. I manage the budget and accounting. I manage all their statistical analysis, their UBO, and their reimbursables, and other things. So
I'm curious, I just want to say that earlier you mentioned that you had racism growing up. Did any of that happen in the military? Or
yeah,
sure.
So
was that also affecting you, by the way, or were you able to adapt and overcome the resilience of that, or?
Yes. So yes, of course, racism is very much alive in the U.S. military. Let me start out with the story. So
go ahead.
When I was enlisted, I was sent to South Korea, and when I was in South Korea, I was wearing civilian clothing. I jumped on the bus. In the evenings, what I did was I taught at the community center. I taught conversational English, and I was teaching the local nationals, how to speak English and stuff like that. And so I was trying to be constructive during my spare time, build up on how to learn to write and speak and things like that. And so when I was teaching that, I jumped on the bus. I was in plain clothes. There was several other individuals on that bus. There was a black officer who was actually the monitor on the bus, and then a very high-ranking enlisted soldier, much higher. He was an E7, and I think I was an E4 maybe at the time. So that's 3 ranks above me. He was drunk. Yeah, I could tell that he was drunk. And he started just beating me in the face and calling me the F word and stuff. He said, "You Katusas, you all think, you're better than us," and all that stuff. Well, I wasn't a Katusa. So what a Katusa is Korean augmentee to the United States Army. And what they are, a Korean soldier on loan to the United States Army. They work alongside with us. And so this sergeant first class immediately started beating me and punching me in the face. And so...
Is that considered illegal now? Or?
Yeah, well, it was illegal then, too.
Oh.
Were there consequences for this?
There was no consequences. The black officer just kind of like said nothing. And, I pushed him away from myself. I hopped up the bus and I walked back.
Was there any experience with white peers, like having racist remarks against you, or was that less frequent?
Yeah, so, they say, they call you names behind your back and stuff like that. They call you gook or chink or, just like, the bullying that I faced when I was a young child.
Was your childhood actually harder than the military? Because it sounds like your child maybe trained you to prepare for the military, or is that not true?
So the military has been much better in controlling racism and stuff like that. So we have what is called equal opportunity. We have individuals that monitor that, and you can complain to someone. When I was younger, I didn't know about those systems. Plus, I was very scared to kind of like to report anything up because A, I didn't know who to go to, and B, I felt that it would just make my life worse, right? And so it was very hard, and I had to just kind of take it in the chops. But yeah, growing up in that small, tiny farming community was much harder and much worse. I mean, like every day when I was in high school, every day of my life, I ate alone on a separate table, only by myself. Like nobody would sit next to me, nobody would talk to me.
Did you have a lot of feelings of loneliness and...
Of course.
And what about anger? Did you ever lash out at all? Or you seem like such a tough guy to me, actually. I'm actually really surprised with all the stuff that happened to you. But
yeah, so when I joined the Army, it's genetics, right? I weighed 112 pounds. I'm the same height that I am today. So really, I was just really a toothpick, right? And so, yeah, farm kids are very strong, period. But they have, the American breed where they're just bigger, right? They play football. There's no way I can go against a linebacker, right? And so, yeah, I just kind of forced to take it in the chops all the time. That builds humility. But during my childhood, I did think a lot about suicide.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that always comes to mind. I thought about running away. I thought about, ending my life, but,
Did you ever come close to tempting, or was there always something that held you back? Fear of dying or fear
And are you religious at all? Or?
No, I'm not really religious today, but back then I was. So yeah, I had that fear of, hey, maybe I'm going to go to hell if I kill myself and things like that. But it wasn't the fear of dying. It was fear of, for me, it was not being able to really live my life that I wanted to live. I wanted to try that. I wanted to go out there, and I knew that was... such thing as love and, experience, great things out that I read about, like I wanted to visit the pyramids in Egypt, which I've done. I wanted to go out there and see the ruins in Angkor Wat, which I've done. Go see the Great Wall of China, which I've done, and all those type of things. So
that's amazing. So what kept you alive, or really hope, is probably through all those books that you actually read. That's probably another solution that some people could actually try to invest in, is read.
Well, again, we're all motivated differently, and it depends on the individual, right? And some people are maybe more emotional and relationship, which I also wanted, again, having that cat and, just having that love for that cat and that pet, right? And that's why I post a lot of pictures of cats and videos of cats, because I just love cats. I'm deathly allergic to them, and I have to get shots and take medication every single day, but to me, it's worth it. The thing is that, we all are moved by something, and use it to a positive view and trying to get yourself to a good place, right, as an individual. So I learned how to do that. I read like a lot of motivational self-help books when I was younger, extensively on that, about how to obtain your goals and things like that. So I did read a very broad range of topics and was interested, in everything in life. So yeah, that kept me going.
I'm curious, let's jump into another topic, like his interest in the KAD community. Did that happen in the military as well, early, later on, or Someone in between.
And I assume you didn't go to any CAD groups when you were younger.
No, I went to 0 CAD groups. I didn't even know that there were that many CADs even in the state of Minnesota, right? So because I just lived a very sheltered life. So let me explain how I got motivated. It was prior to the mid-90s, I was given a chance to go to West Point. I was given a chance. I had a full ride scholarship at St. John's University. I had lots of opportunities, but I knew that if I took an enlistment, which is, very low ranking, that I had the chance to pick or select which place that I wanted to go. So I waited for my opportunity to do that in the meantime while I was going to school. So that's when I went and became an EMT. I was a nurse's aide. I was a nurse. I got my associate's degree in biology and a bunch of other stuff, right? And finally that opportunity came where I was allowed to go on active duty as an enlisted soldier. So I selected South Korea. And I thought, this is my only chance to see the country of my birth, to go ahead and try to find my biological family.
And this was in the 90s, correct?
Mid-90s.
How old were you? Do you remember?
I was early 20s.
Early 20s, okay.
Yeah.
So it was actually pretty young then, because there's a lot of CADs that seem to start their journey late.
Yeah.
Even after 40s or 50s, they haven't even gone
Sure.
back to
So
Korea.
what made you have this urge to...
Oh, because, I tell people, like, for some of us, it's like that salmon. It's swimming against the stream, and it's going against all odds to get back to its place of birth, right? To lay its eggs. And for some of us, it's innate where, oh my gosh, I want to know who I am. I want to know, what my countrymen are like. I want to experience, all those things, right? And so I went to, again, back to South Korea in the mid-90s, and I was sent to the very close to DMZ in a city called Tongdushan and Camp Casey. As a medic, I was told that I had to go through a 30-day rotation so they can test my skills at the clinic. So I went to the clinic, and at that clinic, I had a rotation through the pharmacy. The pharmacist's name is Mrs. Kim, and she goes, "Are you Korean?" I said, "Yes, ma'am, I'm Korean." And she goes, "Oh, are you looking for your family?" I said, "Ma'am, I really would love to know who my family is." And she goes, "Oh, well, she so happened to have went and got her PhD with the president of Eastern Child Welfare Services at that time." And so I already did the research. I found my adoption paperwork on my own because my family didn't give it to me. And I gave her all those documents and gave it to her. And then she gave it to her friend at Eastern Child Welfare Service, the president. When they looked in the file, there was a phone number that was written, and it was to a church. That was my aunt's church. She still continues to go to that church to this day.
Wow.
And so when they called there looking for my last name, there was only one individual with that last name. And fortunately, it's not completely obscure, but it's not as common as a Kim or a Park or a Lee. It's Yoon. So she was only Yoon in that small church. They were able to reach my aunt. My aunt then come and got me, introduced me to my biological father. And so, I've experienced that reunion. And of course, what you think in your head could be a million things. You say, am I part of royalty? Was my, and some people will think the opposite. They might think, was my mom a prostitute, right? Because these are the stories that we're all told. And 95% of the time, 99% of the time, it's incorrect.
Yep.
Right? Because overwhelming majority of the Korean adoptees out there, their moms were not prostitutes. And so the parents who lied about that and said that automatically out of hate and spite or whatever, or to put fear in their child or whatever, it's false. In the opposite, there's a whole host of reasons why. It could have been a pregnant, girl from college. It could have been a family that just didn't have the means to support themselves. A whole host of things. It could have been a very vengeful grandparents that disliked the mother and got rid of the child, or whatever it may be, right? And so there's a whole host of reasons for that.
What was the story behind your adoption story? Why did your birth family adopt you off?
Well, it goes back to my father. So he was actually very wealthy and successful.
So you know your father and your mother, correct?
No, just my father.
Just your father,
Yeah.
okay.
So my father was very wealthy and successful. He was actually the president of a bank.
Wow.
Yeah. So very well to do. He had 4 children at the time. And he ran away with his, I don't know, probably one of his secretaries or whomever. Had 2 more kids. That was my sister and myself.
So there's infidelity in the marriage.
Yeah.
That's kind of like
You aren't
us.
twins, were you?
No, we're not twins. We're
Also
2
happened?
2
It
years
happened
apart.
twice with.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we were actually being raised by my grandparents. And as a child, I remember this, and I always thought that was my father, but it was really my
Oh,
grandfather.
so you were adopted pretty late, is that correct?
I was 4.5 years old.
And you remember?
I remembered
Wow,
everything.
there's
I
a lot of
remember
people
everything.
that don't. You have a really incredible memory then.
Well, it goes back to trauma, right? If you talk to people on how they absorb trauma, there's some people that says, hey, I went into this car accident and every time just kind of stood still and everything was slow and I remembered everything, every detail, right? And then there's other individuals that says, man, I went in a car accident, I blacked out, I don't remember anything, I just woke up in the hospital and I don't know what happened, right? And so it goes back on the DNA and how people are made and how you remember things. And so for me, I think I'm one of those individuals that just sees everything, and I remembered everything because it was a traumatic experience for me. And my grandfather, very wise, very knowledgeable individual. So I remember my grandmother dying, and that we were at her funeral, and I think he realized, oh my gosh, I gotta do something for these kids because if I die, they have no support structure. I got to do something for them, and then he put us up for adoption.
Oh, so your grandfather put
My
you up
grandfather
for adoption.
did,
Oh.
and one thing that he did was I thought was quite brilliant was he changed our birthdays, and so my birthday is actually March 11th, but he changed it to March 1st. My sister's
Not very many. What's the point of that?
So I'll explain. And my sister's birthday was actually August 22nd, and he changed to August 15th. So in history, in the Korean history, March 1st and August 15th are very significant. This is the date in which Korea declared independence, and the other one was when they declared, when they fought against the Japanese. And so he gave us birthdays to remind us of our Korean heritage. Those are the kind of things that I remember. I mean, I realized as I dug into my past and was like, wow, what a brilliant man.
Did he do that out of love or just...
So I have a theory on that, and it goes back to DNA and DNA. So I was one of the first adoptees to ever do my own personal DNA. So when 23andMe opened up, I think this was like in 2007, 2008, I was one of the first individuals to pay for private DNA testing. So I did that through 23andMe and paid for that. I think back then it was like $150.
And you did this test even though you already knew your parents?
Yeah.
What was the reasoning behind doing it then? I'm kind of curious.
Because what 23andMe did was it gives you health information and other things that I didn't have. But what it also extracts from there, though, is what's cool about 23andMe is it tells you when your DNA was inserted. And so it said, for instance, like 1910s, Japanese blood was inserted within my family lineage. In the 1800s, Chinese blood was inserted within my lineage, and so on and so forth, right? And so when I look at my composite of what I'm made out of, and looking at marrying it up to history, I found so many unique things about that. So why would my grandfather really focus on those 2 dates? Well, first of all, when I look at my family tree and my DNA, there's a lot of Japanese blood in us. And that tells me that more than likely, so what a lot of people don't know unless you've studied Korean history.
I thought it would come from Japan and then to Korea,
yes.
That's what I thought. But.
So, early 1900s, Japanese reigned Korea for 40 years.
Yeah, long time.
Right? For a long time. But what a lot of people don't realize is the Japanese also took control of about 60% of all the land. And so they own all the factories. And they were quite horrific people. They would, for instance, force oh, your wife looks pretty, I want to have sex with her, I'll give you an extra bag of rice if you do that, kind of thing. They actually did those kind of things. And so this notion of Japanese were only cruel during World War II is false. They were already doing these inhumane things to the Koreans when they were occupying South Korea during that time frame. And so that's why Koreans, if you look at their DNA, the DNA doesn't lie, but the Koreans themselves are about saving face, making sure that you don't bring dishonor to your family. And a lot of them took very great lengths to lie in their family tree that mom wasn't raped, those kind of things. And they lied about those things.
I think that causes problems with people's adoptions too, because they just want to lie and they can't find the truth of things. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that's where that divergence happened, where I think, prior to the Japanese, doing all those things, I don't think that kind of stuff happened as much prior to that. And I think that become much more normalized, and people took that as saving face and things like that. And so that's a linkage that I found from reading lots of history about the region and what occurred. So
I'm kind of curious. This is kind of off topic, but why would the Japanese be more wealthy than the Koreans? I assume they had power over the Koreans. Why is that for 40 years? And
plus, they live on an island. You think that living on an island, they're more separated, so you won't have as much resources.
Do you know the reason?
Yeah. So their military was much stronger at the time, and it was much more developed. So they had guns and weapons and other things, right? And, Korea and Japan had been kind of at each other for many centuries.
I was actually kind of wondering about your personal feelings about Japanese. Do you kind of have a distaste for them? I know it's the Olympics, and I was just wondering if there's anything with that.
No, I actually had a Japanese girlfriend when I went to college. So I have no ill will or anger towards the Japanese. Now, I think Japanese do need to be accountable for what they did. They should apologize. They should pay retribution, especially
I don't think they have, actually.
No, they have not.
It.
They deny it, and they should pay retribution to the comfort women. I also believe that they should go and place these black marks in their history books, but neither do Americans.
Yep.
Americans don't write about, doing the syphilis experimentation on black people. A lot of the bad things that we did, we glorify them.
It's written off a race in history.
Yeah, we glorify that. I mean, look at Christopher Columbus. If you really studied about him,
he's an asshole.
He was horrific. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people were slaughtered. Just horrific, right? But that's not what we think. We even have a holiday, Columbus Day. Really? Of a guy who slaughtered hundreds of thousands of people and pretty much annihilated a whole group of Native Americans? No, I don't think it's worth celebrating at all, and I think it's wrong. But again, it goes...
Do you believe in the white supremacy kind of some people believe in America, or have you have you dealt with that?
I think it's blatantly obvious, especially what happened with the previous president being in power, right? And all the things that was expressed during that time, Those individuals, had it been a group of black people that rioted and forced themselves inside of Capitol Hill, be a totally different outcome right now, right? And so to deny that any of that is in play in America today, I think you're just lying to yourself. Now, I think it's much more open now, which makes it dangerous. We've seen a huge increase in attacks on Asian Americans. I mean, you can't fight facts. The facts are there. You see that increase. You see an outlash against Asian Americans due to the Chinese virus. It doesn't matter if you're Cambodian, Lao, whatever. They're just going to group everybody in kind of the same group, right? So, unfortunately, those things still happen. But each individual need to take that stance of, not.
Did you experience that kind of stuff in the military? I kind of imagine being an Asian person.
Sure. It was tough, I mean... I felt like I had to work much harder than my white counterparts all the time. You just had to be, tougher, stronger, harder. And I'm not the only one that says that. I mean, many, many others have expressed the same thing. It's just, I'm very vocal about it. and work very hard to make sure we bring inclusiveness within the military, and that we do everything we can to make things fair and to ensure that, we actually uphold those values that we claim, right? So the military is all about these values, call it leadership, loyalty, duty, respect, right? Selfless service, honor, right? Integrity, and personal courage. Well, we could just talk about that and just state that, or we should live it, right? And so I have supported EEO throughout my entire career. I even did a video spot for AFN. It's still running today on equal opportunity. So I really push for that. I don't care if you're a woman, gay, transgender, whatever. We should treat you fairly and equally, period. And
So you thought that Trump thing was kind of BS thing where you're kind of talking about like they were kind of against gay people joining the forces, is that correct? And did they change that now? No,
that's not changed. I think military in general has been leading the front in making sure that we have this, we include others within our ranks. So they were one of the first to, bring women on the military force, blacks on the military force, and so on. So, and I'm proud of that lineage of the Army doing the right thing or the military doing the right thing. So we just need to continue down that path. And there are many people out there in leadership out there who are doing the right thing, I think some of the cases that I talked about are isolated. It's not the norm. It's not every day. And that's why we are a military. People will respect you because of the rank you hold. They'll respect you because of the position you hold. And they'll respect you as, for what you do and how you lead. Yeah, so that's why I love the military, because we do uphold these values. Of course, you're going to have a few bad apples here and there. I had a soldier who raped someone when I was in command in South Korea, and I had to go in trial with him and kick him out of the military and stuff like that. So you do have bad apples everywhere. It's not excusing it. It's just stating a matter of fact that, you have all sorts of people within your ranks. Right?
So it sounds like you have overall picture. It sounds like the military is not as corrupt as maybe like some people think.
Yeah, I don't think the military is corrupt. In fact, majority of the men and women that I serve with are very noble.
Okay.
They want to do the right thing, and they want to go out there and be able to be proud for their country while they're in uniform.